My belated October reading wrap up. So like I mentioned in my last video, I started going back to school right at the beginning of October, and I'm taking creative writing and literary analysis classes program full-time, and it's a lot of work. It's a lot of mental work, as you can imagine, and I just haven't devoted as much time every day to reading for fun. I have also been doing a lot of reading for the program, so my stats for this month are the lowest they've been all year, which is a bummer, but it is what it is. I did make the executive decision about middle way through last month to go ahead and start tracking all the reading I was doing for class. I made special categories for it in my spreadsheet. That way it could contribute to my page goal. It's not counting towards my Goodreads goal because these things are short essays and excerpts from larger books, but few more pages. So let me pull up my stats real fast. I read 9 separate things, so like separate entries into the spreadsheet, totaling 1,371 pages for an average number of pages read to be 44 pages per day. Like I said, that is the lowest I've had this year by about 320 pages, so it's roughly one book less than how many pages I read in January, which is surprising. I also don't know why January has been my lowest reading month. Like, why didn't I read that much in January? Who knows? And it is a little bit, it's a bummer after, like, I had such a good September. I read almost 2,800 pages, you know? Of those 1,300 pages, 514 of those pages were a part of class reading. Maybe 40% of what I read last month was class reading. So I'll go ahead and talk about the class reading first, just kind of go through it really quickly. I'm taking a program at a very avant-garde liberal arts college called Decision Making, and it is creative writing and literary analysis. The first portion of the quarter was really focused on literary analysis, understanding literacies, close, near, and far readings of texts, and then we also had a unit on Antigone, the play by Sophocles. So, for class, I read the short story Half-Eaten Cities by Vajra Chandrasekhara. This is part of a anthology of short stories on climate change, and actually I will try to look up the name of this anthology and leave a link to it down below, because it is a very interesting anthology of slightly speculative work on climate change fiction. So that was really cool. That was like a micro story. It was only about 3 pages, but that was really cool. So then we also read a section from a book titled Meander, Spiral, Explode by Jane Allison. And this is a book talking about story structure and alternative forms of structure, and also talking about the Aristotelian 3-act structure. And it is a very interesting book. I actually want to get my hands on a copy of the full text and read all of it, because I thought it was very interesting. Allison equates different novel structures or structure possibilities to different forms in nature, and it's very interesting, just kind of pushing back against the idea of, like, the 3-act structure has to be the only structure. Why is that like such a prevalent structure when it's not even a very natural form? It's fascinating. So yeah, read that. Then I also read a section, I think this is from one of his memoirs, but it was a section called Why Do I Fast by Wole Soyinka. Soyinka was a rights activist. Let me double check where he was from, because I am having... Oh, yeah, okay. He was a rights activist in Nigeria. I thought so, but I wanted to double check. And this portion, Why Do I Fast, is from a book he wrote where he was talking about his time in an imprisonment during a political coup upheaval in Nigeria, I want to say in the 70s, and he hunger struck. He was on hunger strike while in prison, and he was imprisoned because he was a radical thinker, basically. And so, yeah, we read this. Not my favorite piece. I found it a little bit triggering and a little bit an unfortunate choice for a class. It was literally the first thing we read for this class, and I had so much dread reading it because I do have a history of eating disorders, and apparently some other people emailed the professors about that too. So hopefully if they use the text again, it'll come with, I don't know, trigger warnings or something. I don't know. Anyway. Moving on. And then another thing I read was it was an article basically by Jacqueline Joynes Royster called "When the First Voice You Hear Is Not Your Own." It's talking about how really dominant white voices are in fields like writing, academia, etc. And how do I even talk about this? She recounts a few exchanges, like with colleagues coming up to her and being like, "Wow, you're so eloquent," as though that's a compliment when really they're just being racist. So yeah, that was from some like technical trade magazine, and it was a very interesting article, just talking about literacies and voices, and yeah. Then I read another excerpt from a longer book called The Great Derangement, Climate Change and the Unthinkable by Amitav Ghosh. I would not recommend this. I think Amitav Ghosh is an interesting writer. However, his argument, and we read the entire first section where he was kind of setting the groundwork for his argument. I feel like his groundwork is a little bit bunk, because his whole thing is about how serious literature has not tackled climate change. And he's talking about how... Okay, so here's the thing. So fundamentally, I actually agree with his argument. So fundamentally, he's talking about how contemporary fiction, literary fiction, does not tackle climate change. And he muses on why that is, and he talks about the development of modern literature. He talks about kind of the cultural, sociological ways that modern literature has been shaped and shapes thinking, and that's all interesting, and I think he's onto something, that a lot of what we consider contemporary literature does not tackle climate change. Like, climate change is happening right now. Like, we are feeling the effects of climate change, and yet so often contemporary books do not touch on them. And I do think that's a valid and interesting thing. And he in the section we read, he doesn't trace it to Protestantism, but I think that there is a very strong connection there. So he has some very interesting thoughts. However, my big beef with him is that he classifies everything outside of, quote, literary fiction, which is a term I do not like, as non-serious fiction. He several times refers to it as the outbuildings, the outhouses of fiction. And when he's talking about the fictions, contemporary fiction, that serious fiction, he's like, it's the books, it's like the books that get nominated for Booker Prizes. Those are the type of books he is talking about, and those are the only type of books that are considered serious fiction. And he talks about how, like, SFF, or actually he's specifically talking about science fiction, how it was devalued. Like, it had a brief moment right at its inception where it was considered serious, and now it's no longer serious fiction. It's just the dregs, the outbuildings of fiction. And I call bullshit. I also took just so much umbrage with this idea of literary fiction. There is a great video on booktube that I cannot find where someone was talking about how they are no longer going to use the term literary fiction as a genre, because it's not a genre, and I agree. I think literary literary is technically like a word that denotes how something is written, not what the thing that's being written about is. So like I would prefer to like every single book that's going to be nominated for a Women's Prize book or like a Booker book or a National Book Award or whatever. Those are mostly contemporary novels. It's not literary fiction, it's just contemporary fiction. Like, because they're set in like the same year that they're being written, basically. And also we will allow that like historical fiction loves to wander into those awards too, and it's historical fiction written in a literary way. So it's contemporary fiction written in a literary way. And I think that this argument that serious fiction isn't tackling climate change is such a fucking disservice to all of the SFF literally tackling climate change. And he also makes the argument that science fiction, it's only looking towards the far future. No, it's not. Like, all you need to do is read Jeff Vandermeer or N.K. Jemisin or Emma Newman. And, like, seriously, go read Emma Newman's Planetfall books. It's not that far into our future. They're talking about, I mean, hell, even Cloud Atlas, David Mitchell, back in 2003, they're talking about the potential effects of climate change, and it's very near looming thing. They are not far projecting. They are taking things that are happening now and extrapolating very near futures. And a lot of them are doing it in ways that are very literary. And so it's like such a slap in the face to the genre. And I think, frankly, it shows that he's maybe not as versed in it and maybe shouldn't be speaking to it, because The Great Derangement is not that old. It wasn't published that long ago. So anyway, I've definitely, like, I'll get off my soapbox here. But like, that was a very frustrating text to read. I had some interesting conversations in class about it. One of my professors, she has written speculative literary books on climate change like several years ago. So because climate change is actually like a topic that's very high in the minds of like a lot of the professors at this college. It's kind of something that the college does focus on a lot. And so, we had some really interesting, very good topics about it. But anyways, I did read that. I don't think I would pick it up or read more, frankly. And then after that, I also read Antigone, the entire Antigone play by Sophocles. This is the second time I've read Antigone. I read it once in high school. We read it in high school. I want to say my sophomore year in high school. It was like technically junior. Maybe it was senior seminar. Because we were reading the C.S. Lewis book, Till We Have Faces, which is like his Christian retelling of Antigone. So, yeah. Second time reading it. Don't really have a whole lot to say. It's an interesting text. I also watched the live Zoom Theater of War production of it, which was interesting. Jason Isaacs as Creon on a Zoom call. Cool. A lot of other really good people who I didn't recognize, but they did good jobs. It was really interesting. And actually, if you're looking for like kind of live theater with like a very culturally conscious kind of thought behind it, you might check out Theater of War. I'll leave a link to them down below because they're putting on plays all the time and they're free and they're just on Zoom. I need some tea. I talk too much about The Great Derangement. So anyways, I read Antigone. It was interesting. I definitely find it more interesting as like a play on its own. I remember not digging Till We Have Faces, but that was like 14 years ago, so I don't really remember it. Okay. Then, still not done. The next thing I read for class was a novel, and oh my god, I had to read this in like 4 days because I took too long to get to it. It was The Street by Ann Petrie. So this was a tough one for me to read. It was published in 1946 by Ann Petrie, who's an African-American author, and it is about an African-American protagonist living in Harlem in like the early 40s. and her struggles. She's living on a very poor street in Harlem, and a lot of bad shit happens, and it was tough. I mean, it's family drama, small community drama. It is effectively contemporary fiction slash historical fiction. It's historical fiction now, but it was contemporary fiction then, and it deals with a lot of violence against women, or like violent thoughts about or thoughts about committing violence against women. They're trigger warning for an assault, an attempted assault, trigger warning for like domestic abuse. So yeah, it was a rough book. I ended up this is the first time I've actually gone back and forth between like reading a book and listening to it on audiobook. I just had to do that so I could get it read in time for class. I do think it's interesting. I do think it is a text worth picking up. I think it is a very good example of like early 20th century African American literature, especially written by a woman, which we don't often get. So I think it is really interesting, and it is looking intimately at the effect of racism and poverty and unemployment on the lives of African Americans at this time. And yeah, it's about a woman named Lily Johnson. She's a single mother trying to raise her young son. She wants to move them to their own place so he doesn't have any bad influences around him. So she rents an apartment in the street. I think it's 116th Street in the book. And she realizes as she does this that the place that she's moved them to isn't really any better than the place that they were, because it's still mired in poverty, and the only way she can actually give her son a better life is if she figures out some way to make more money, so that she can move them somewhere better. And just and all the things tie into that. So there you go. Read The Street. And I think that was the last thing I read for class this month. Yes. So that's everything I read for class. Probably sounds like a little bit of a hodgepodge, but there you go. Then for myself, I read one other audiobook. That was Arabella and the Traitor of Mars. This is the third book in the Arabella of Mars series. I gave this one 4 stars. I might give it like 3.75. This is good. It didn't have the irritating like Arabella Captain Fox flirtation that I didn't like in the second book. However, I will say Arabella does stray way too much into the white savior trope in this book. This book is dealing with colonialization, and because it takes place during the late Regency, and it's about the kind of plot is that the Prince Regent, George whatever, wants to not just have a treaty with the Martians, but he wants to conquer the Martians so that he controls the whole planet. And I actually think that Mars is supposed to be a metaphor for China, because one of the tactics they're going to use, because the Mars Company, who I think is supposed to be a stand-in for the West India Trading Company, is they're the ones spurring him on to do this. And also one of the tactics they're going to use to subjugate the Martians is to introduce an addictive substance from Venus, which is a parallel to cocaine or heroin. I can't remember, but I'm pretty sure, I'm almost positive, like the British and the East India Trading Company, might be getting the trading company wrong, but they introduced, did they introduce opium to China? Maybe that was it. And to weaken the local government, basically, and the populace, and colonize them. So it's dealing with all of that. Arabella considers herself a Martian, not like culturally, but she was born on Mars. Mars is her planet, that kind of thing. So she races to Mars to warn the Martians about this plan from the Prince Regent and to help marshal a guerrilla-esque combative force to fight off the British. And it's interesting, but it's kind of like Gail Carriger. I don't think it's always given the like subtlety and nuance this kind of sensitive topic really deserves. And so there we go into it leans a little heavily on the white savior tropes. So there you go. Still good. I would still recommend the trilogy. I think it's pretty good. And the naval battle scenes are like so good. Okay. Then after that, I did read an arc. That was The Adventures of Isabel by Candace Jane Dorsey. And I was supposed to do an individual review of this because I got this book from NetGalley, and I just haven't. I didn't even write a written review, and I'm so bad. But anyways, this is a piece of Canadian fiction, actually. And it's set in Canada too, which is very unusual. And it's a mystery detective novel. And it's supposed to be the first one in a series. It's also very queer. Our protagonist is bisexual or lesbian. Can't remember how she identifies herself now. I want to say she's bisexual, but she also has a FF relationship in the course of the book. Her best friend is a gay man who also has a MM relationship in the book. And there's just a lot of queer characters scattered throughout it. I will say this reads like a progressive novel written in 2002. So, but with slightly better optics on things like cross-dressing and trans people. Like, it is a little bit better about that because, like, those topics would not have necessarily been super well handled in 2002. Let me just say, I had this strong queer as folk vibe when I was reading this. It has none of the same, like, plot elements. It's about a woman. She's been let go from her job. I think she was a social worker. She was basically fired for being queer. And she's running out of funds. And a friend of a friend's granddaughter winds up dead. And so the friend of a friend hires her to investigate. And it draws in just a ton of different characters. And so she's looking into the murder. It is not written like a traditional novel. And that's the other thing. Structurally and tonally, it actually reminded me a lot of String City, which is a detective novel. It's a speculative detective novel by Graham Edwards I read last year, the year before. I want to say I have a full review of it. If I do, I'll link it up above. It reminded me tonally and structurally a lot of that. It's very, like, irreverent. It breaks the fourth wall a lot. It's very meta. And so, but yeah, and it also just has this, like, early 2000s vibe to it. So it's definitely not going to be everyone's cup of tea, but ultimately I found it pretty fun to read, to be honest. So yeah, that was The Adventures of Isabel. The next thing I read was Babel 17 by Samuel R. Delaney. I read this for the Golden Oldies book club, and this is a 1960s science fiction novel with Samuel R. Delaney, who is a queer African-American writer. This did win the Nebula, I think, but it lost the Hugo. And this is interesting. It's about far future. We've got like the us, and we've got the invaders. But the invaders are actually just other humans. So it's us versus them kind of a thing. And there's this code that this poet has been contracted to decipher, and she discovers that it's actually a language. And so she gets a ship and a crew, and she's racing off to try to catch more of the language. The language is like communication from the invaders that coincides with sabotage, and it's her working to unravel the language and understand it, and it's really interesting. There is fat phobia in it, which is just, like, unfortunate. And so, like, I only gave it 4 stars because I think it's flawed, but it is really interesting, and it's a fun, like, kind of space romp with, like, a lot of philosophizing about language and thought and how language shapes our understanding. So it is very interesting. I don't know if I'll read any more Samuel R. Delaney because I hear that his other books are, like, radically different. I might, if he has, like, another kind of sci-fi novel in the vein of this one, I would not be opposed to reading more. And then after that, the last thing, oh wait, no, it's not the last thing. I read most of a book in October, but I didn't finish until the beginning of November, so I guess I can't talk about it. So that's everything I read in September. Most of it was just for class. I'll try to leave links to the stuff I've talked about down below, or at least the major things that I talked about. And if any of them sounded interesting, either the books or like the more academic things, like I said, I think the Jane Allison spiral text sounds like very, very interesting if you're at all a writer or interested in writing or anything like that, or story structure. So let me know how your October is going. Sorry for being absent for so long. It's not gonna get any better because school goes on till first week in December, and then I'm gonna be in this program all year. I think writing will just be a little bit lower than usual. However, I will say, hooray! I did hit my Goodreads reading goal for the year. My Goodreads reading goal was 72 books. I surpassed that a little while ago. I think I'm up to 76 books now. 72 was based off of what I read last year, and I just like added 12 books to that with the idea that I'd like already like rounded up or something, so that I would like push myself to read one extra book per month. But I think that's pretty cool, and I think my overall page count is way up for this year. So like in general, I have read longer books this year. However, you know, I was tracking that in my spreadsheet, but putting in a bunch of like 2-page, 3-page, 5-page, 20-page things for class tanked that statistic. So now that I'm thinking about it, I can probably add an exception to the array that calculates page length by just excluding anything under a certain category. I think I'm going to do that because I really like to know what like the average length of the books I'm reading is. This year, kind of one of my low-key goals was to read more longer books, and I've more or less been doing that. I mean, I have been reading a lot of novellas and stuff in between, but I've also tackled some like longer books that scare me. I mean, like that's the goal because reading long books is so difficult for me. I can't explain why. Short attention span, I don't know, but yeah, that's what I've been doing. Yay, I hit my meaningless Goodreads goal. When I was approaching it originally, like approaching hitting it, I was thinking, oh, I should go ahead and up that to 100, but I'm not going to do that because I'm just going to be satisfied that I'm still reading every month despite class, and call it good. Life updates. I am casually doing NaNoWriMo, though I have no intention of like hitting the 50,000 words this month. I'm just trying to write more days than not at this point. I think I've written about 3,700 words this month. I had to take this weekend off to write an essay for class, which sucked, but you gotta do what you gotta do. And I'm filming this video instead of writing because I don't want to. But yeah, thanks for watching. Thanks for tuning in. Probably 5 of you who are going to watch this. It's tough to be like a small channel on YouTube and just then also disappear. It's not great for like the algorithm's interaction with your channel, but whatever. This is like a personal blog for me more than anything else. But yeah, thanks for watching. Let me know down in October, or let me know down in the comments below if you read anything really cool in October, especially if it's anything you think that I might be interested in. Any new releases. I know I mentioned a few new releases last month that I'd been reading, but let me know if you've read any new ones that are good that I might be interested in. And yeah, I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye.